Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. I'm going to be doing the mid-year Freakout book tag today. I have read, as of today, 286 books out of a goal of 400, 92 books ahead of schedule, 72% there right now. So for some of these it's going to be hard to choose because I've read so many books. So for some of these things I'm going to quickly choose just a couple. Plus I've only started doing these videos recently, so a bunch of these books I haven't even talked about on videos, so maybe it'll be interesting to do a small little recap of why I like each book or whatever's pertinent to the category. So for the first thing, it is, what is the best book of the year so far for me? For me it would be the final revival of Opal and Nev, which I have on Audible because, like Daisy Jones and the Six, it's an oral history with a cast that is narrating it. The cast is phenomenal. The story is great. It's about a British guy and a black woman from, I can't remember where, Chicago maybe, or Baltimore, something like that, who get connected in order to form a new band. He sings really off-kilter, weird stuff. I kind of picture him as like, almost like a Leonard Cohen. And then she comes from like a gospel background, but then they form like this fictional, of course, famous band in the 70s, and it's what happened to them, how they were formed, what circumstances the music industry was at the time. So it really takes what Daisy Jones and the Six did and kind of roll with it and add more context, more deeper themes, I would say. It's not just like a love story, although there's love in it. So there's lots of stuff going on, and it's just a phenomenal read. The other one, the sort of secondary place that I would give, is Dead Astronauts by VanderMeer. It's set in the same world as Borne. It's very cool. It's a very experimental fiction. In order to really grasp what is actually happening, you need to read the book more than one time usually. Thankfully it's short, but it plays with time, it plays with some of the stuff that has been established in Borne already, although it's not really required. I read it years after reading Borne and I still was able to pick up on the elements, but it definitely reveals things that you wonder about in Borne. In this one, it's just way different. It's about a team who are all bio-enhanced, bioengineered. They're not strictly human anymore, but have some kind of like powers, like sort of premonition. It has different loops in time that they go through while they try to achieve an objective in a sort of like military-esque way, but not. There is that military component, but the problem that they have to solve doesn't have anything to do with that generally. There's a whole bunch of different variables that they have to navigate, and they only are able to do so by going through an experience multiple times. And then the actual structure of the narrative, while having the loop numbers to the side, also jump around in time as well. So it's very trippy, as the cover suggests, but it's a really interesting read. It's fairly dense for sure, but it's something that will keep you engaged the entire length and has a shelf life because you can keep rereading it and gleaning different things. There's a whole Reddit post about this book about what people think actually happened plot-wise in it. So there's lots of different things to decipher. It's very cool. The next tag is Best Sequel. I'm cheating and gonna have a few here. The first is The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. I really liked this just because it kind of updates practical magic in a way that makes it super interesting. Her compelling voice is still there. It's even more refined. The characters are more interesting, and the actual definition of the rules of magic in itself as it happens is more understandable, relatable, and interesting in the book. So I just really liked it. The next one is A Dangerous Crossing by Ausma Zehanat Khan. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. This is the fourth book, I believe, in a series, which is the Rachel Getty Khattak series that is a fictional accounting of a community policing effort in Canada, where Isa, the Muslim, is the head of this unit that is supposed to be intersectional with different communities in Toronto. And because it's such a melting pot of cultures there, it's a experimental unit that is always putting pressure on him to perform, and so it kind of works as a lens for the reader to understand the geopolitics of Toronto, the different perspective, and how he's able to look at certain cases through his lens differently than a white person like Rachel Getty. But the two perspectives work in tandem in order to solve a case. And every case is based on something that's actually happened, either abroad or in Canada itself. A Dangerous Crossing is the Syrian refugee crisis. And at the end of every story, the author always goes into a whole bunch of detail about whatever crisis or international incident or whatever she is speaking about into it. So you get the factual information, but you also get the sort of fictional police procedural stuff mixed with a really interesting combination of the characters' perspectives. It's a phenomenal series. It ran 5 books and then concluded, but she's got another series coming out, I think this year or next. And it's a community policing effort thing as well, but I think it's in America this time. And then the final book is The Dragon Republic, which I just thought was incredible. I had a few reservations about the Poppy War itself in the first book, how it was going to treat the themes that it established, and all of my worries were totally assuaged in The Dragon Republic. It hits so perfectly for me. Everything is turned up for 11 for the things that you wanted, or at least the things that I wanted to see in the Poppy Wars, and then all of the things that could have fallen into problematic area were completely unfounded. She handled all of the subject matter very well. The tone of the story goes much the same way, but she treats the characters with a lot of care. She treats the subject matter with a lot of care, and everybody's arcs are just perfect. And I just really like that the main character is so vibrant and able to not be held back, I guess, by the type of narrative that you're expecting. You would think that for a story like that, you would want her to be likable, but her character arc, as it turns out, at least for me, is quite different than what I expected. And I did read the Burning God and loved it. I just don't have it yet. But for me, I think the best was The Dragon Republic for me. So what is the third question? New releases that I want to read. I have Walking with Ghosts by Gabriel Byrne that I really want to read. Gabriel Byrne is an actor that I sort of like imprinted on when In Treatment was on HBO years ago. It's a show where he's a psychologist, and every day of the week is a different patient, with the last day of the week being his own therapy with his own therapist. And that show just was one of those shows that kind of like blew my mind at the time. And there's actually a new season out that is also very well done. and has different characters, but that's where I first sort of learned about Gabriel Byrne and went into his filmography and everything. And I think that he would have a really interesting biography, so I can't wait to get into that. And a new release from the second half of the year is going to be In My Dream, I Hold a Knife. It has been described as dark academia, murder mystery type situation, mystery thriller. And I just read The Secret History this year and loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I have a video on it. And to have a sort of mystery thriller in the same vibe, same setup, same aesthetic as that, it's just something that I'm really interested in. Hopefully it's delivering on those concepts really well. On Goodreads, it seems like a lot of people are reacting positively to it, so we'll see if it's for me as well. So the biggest disappointments by far, All the Ugly and Wonderful Things. People really like this book, but after reading Lolita and realizing that it's not the story that you expect based on what pop culture has even dubbed Lolita to be, this is sort of a story that is what I thought Lolita would be, in that it is a precocious young child who is going after an older man sexually, but she is trying to make it a situation where two broken people sort of deserve this love that they fostered, except that for me, none of it worked at all, basically. I gave it 1 star. I really didn't like it. I didn't even think the characters were very developed. All of the information that you get about them is when he's 28 or 30 or whatever, and she's 12 years old. And he's shown to be kind of a simpleton, but clearly morally okay with doing really messed up stuff, because Wavy, the love interest, who's 12 years old, is the daughter of this drug runner guy, basically, who is kind of the life of the town. He makes lots of money. He has a wife that he cheats on with everybody. All these women are trying to sleep with him. And the other love interest of Wavy is a subordinate of him and is kind of like the muscle of the group, basically. Basically, the prose didn't work for me. The actual premise wasn't justified, in my opinion. There wasn't character development. There was no depth to the story. It was very surface level, and I don't understand why it is so highly rated at all, basically. Similarly, Catch-22, I did not like at all. I understand what it was doing and I can appreciate it, but the misogyny that was existing in the text was wild. It's like one of those old people, old comedians telling jokes to you about something that is very political with an undercurrent of misogyny all of the time. Women exist in that fiction just to be slept with or to be punchlines of a joke. It wants you to think that all of this is justified in its satirical nature, but it just doesn't land for me and is tone deaf, and I didn't like it at all. I gave it 1 star as well. And then the last one is The Silent Patient, which people loved, but I felt was very clumsy. I thought that it felt like the writer was LARPing a mental health professional from the 70s or something like that, or more like what the dominant culture thought mental health was in the 70s, and then we made movies about it. And that kind of approach to what a mental professional is the thing that is existing in the story still. And the problem is that the narration is first person, which automatically makes it unreliable. The twist really hinges on you suspending disbelief for something that is super unbelievable. No person that knows anything about mental health or about the human body, basically, without giving away spoilers, I think could suspend disbelief for what the twist requires. And so just all of it just didn't really work for me. It felt very sloppy, ham-fisted, and predictable to me. I think it's just a case of the author not being for me whatsoever. And that's fine. So, the biggest surprise. I haven't made a video on this because the book releases, I believe, next month, maybe mid-month. It's Her Turn by Catherine Ashenberg. So this is a contemporary book about a older woman, not really older, more like 40 years old or something like that. And she is divorced, she works at a paper, she runs a column where people just sort of talk about the things that are going on in their life. The column is supposed to be something that is slightly provocative, a little bit intelligent, but doesn't make waves because the paper is owned by a corporation, of course. And it tracks the life of this woman who, her life is kind of getting out of control even though she can't see it, and what the underlying problems are that caused this for her. It was really great. It's described as Nora Ephron-like, and I could see why that is the case, but I would say it's less sort of New York fairy tale and more satirical in its look at how other people perceive midlife crises to be, and sort of where we're at culturally on certain different subjects and stuff. But I'll talk about that more in the video when it comes up. It was great. I gave it 4 stars. It's CanLit, Canadian literature, so if you can get your hands on it, you should read it and give it a boost. Another big surprise for me was Effect by Charlene Elsby. I've got a video on that. I love that book. It's experimental, also Canadian literature. You should check it out if you can. Topics of Conversation by Miranda Popke. I listened to on audio and I loved it. I guess the actual text is written in a sort of like a spoken word type situation. And so when it is spoken, it's incredible. So that's how I listened to it, and I thought it was awesome. It has a main character who, over the course of numerous points in her life, every few years, she is making a conversation with either random people or people that she knows very well. And they're basically talking about the innermost things in their life, like their biggest hopes, their biggest failures, their biggest confessions. And it all just really worked for me. I know it was kind of hit and miss for other people, but I found it very accessible, very interesting, very honest and earnest, and I respond to that. Some people kind of comically said that she wasn't very likable, which just kind of makes me laugh, because it would be like your best friend coming to you and saying that she needed to tell you something really important about herself, and then she tells you that, and then you're kind of like, okay, but you're not very likable. You know, like, she isn't intending to divulge this stuff for likability. It is a Me Too book. It's feminist, and it's trying to touch on certain topics while making the main character very vulnerable, and I thought it was incredible. But to each their own, I guess. Another big surprise for me was this. Hopefully you've heard of it, The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. This was a big surprise to me because I thought it was YA fantasy, so I've been putting it off for a little while. I had it on my Kindle for Prime reading or something like that, or maybe it was just cheap and I nabbed it. It is not YA, it is very mature, I would say, although it does kind of dabble into YA territory when it takes on the voice of the young protagonist. It switches constantly between a young boy and the mother, which is really interesting, I thought. It is a fantasy world in which the sword of Kaigan is like a peninsula, and their job is to prepare for war. They're like the tip of the sword. If any other nation is going to attack, it's probably going to be this point, so they need to be like the biggest, baddest, strongest warriors. And it works as a narrative for confronting toxic masculinity, for confronting gender roles, for confronting just like totalitarianism and what exactly is your responsibility to as a individual for patriotism, nationalism, and all of those kind of things. It's a very hard-hitting book. I thought it was fantastic. It does lots of cool things, and it still remains really good at like not being too dark, but being dark when it is necessary, if that makes sense. Yeah, it was definitely a very big surprise. It is pretty highly rated on Goodreads, so I think it just sort of escaped my notice for a while. Everything that is on my Kindle kind of gets pushed to the side unless it's from like NetGalley or something. So I was just a fool to wait, and you should not. You should pick this book up. It is a self-published book too, so you'd be helping out the author. So it's something to think about. Favorite new author, or new to me, is gonna be definitely Vita Nostra. Not Vita Nostra, but the writing couple Marina and Sergei Dyachenko, translated by Julia Mayatov-Hersey, perhaps. This book blew me away. I just made a video about it. I won't go too into this, but it's dark science fiction fantasy that's very intersectional between fantasy and science fiction. It's magical boarding school done in a way that you'll never guess. It incorporates themes about academia, about coming of age in really clever ways, and the magic system is something that is just incredible. Blew my mind. Prose are great. Everything about this book is awesome. You should definitely check it out. I don't really get crushes, but one of the characters that I've read this year that I really identified with comes from this book, Feast Your Eyes by Maya Goldberg. Without going into spoiler territory or a long diatribe, or not diatribe, but a tangent, it's about a daughter who has a mother who is sort of like transient in her life. She's a very famous photographer, but doesn't have much time for her children, and her life is just very complex and confusing to the daughter. And posthumously, I believe, she is kind of compiling her mother's life and telling that story. It's another sort of Daisy Jones and the Six oral history type situations, but done in a really interesting way. The photographer, the mother herself, is just exceptionally interesting. She's trying to reconcile her empowerment in finding an art form while also trying to have the things in her life that she wants, and it's done in such a way as to communicate so many deep themes and so much depth and richness at a life lived, but acknowledging those things that she cannot change and sort of accepting everything. So just her, the mother as a character, to be clear, is the one that I identify very much with, and I would recommend it. It's a fantastic read. It's so good. I imagine the audiobook would be really good just because of the oral history quality of it. So next up we have books that made you cry. These two definitely did. They're both YA. Clap When You Land is about a man who dies, and it turns out that he has a daughter in a country that is unaware of sort of everything going on with his life. I don't want to give too much away, but basically he continues to go back to a different country, and he's kind of transient in her life. And when he dies, all of these different secrets about his life are disseminated into the mother and the daughter's life, and they have to reconcile all of these different things about the person that they thought they knew, especially for the daughter herself. The daughter is sort of an immigrant in this new location, and where she comes from, you get the other perspective of the person there. So you understand cultural differences, cultural divides, when the mother tells the daughter about certain aspects of their the dad and husband's life that she'll never understand. Then it cuts to the actual people living in that area and having that lived experience. So it's just really fascinating. And when it gets sad, it gets sad. Girl Made of Stars is really heavy. I would do a content warning for this, in that it is about a girl in high school who finds out that her brother may or may not have raped somebody at a party, and how she reconciles that. She's also a queer woman who has just come out. She's searching for identity, and her brother, who by the way is a twin, and they're wrapped up personality wise, and they're like each other's person, but then they have to navigate this new situation, and you're also trying to figure out what is empirically true versus what people are feeling, and then making sure to realize that both are true things. So it's very heavy, but it's very well done, I think, and I think that you would cry as well. Books that made me happy this year. I don't read a lot of feel-good books, but Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. All of those books are like a warm blanket with some hot chocolate. They're so good. They're very, even when it's sad, it's got like a cozy vibe going on, and it's just told in a way that says that it has you, basically. It's got you. The other one is Pizza Girl by Jean Fraser. That was just comedy done well, basically. She's Pizza Girl is a young teenager who loses her father and becomes pregnant, and is trying to reconcile all of these notions that she has about her father that are kind of like resurfacing with the pain and the guilt of his death. He wasn't a very good person to her or other people, but she's trying to like figure out what her own identity means, and somehow the comedy just works. Sometimes it's dark comedy, sometimes it's really dry. The overall situations that she finds herself in are just comical sometimes, even when they're dark. Yeah, in the end, it just sort of left me feeling happy, even though it's about grief and loss. And I think that's an achievement in and of itself. The most beautiful books of the year. Oh, look at that. Daughter from the Dark, which is the sequel to Vita Nostra. That cover. And then also, of course, Dead Astronauts, I think, are the two that I have that are like, whoa, this is amazing. So what books do I need to read? Well, I mean, I have for one, I'm 120 something change away from my actual goal, so a lot. But some of the ones that I own that I really want to get to: Sacred Games, Fingersmith, which, by the way, The Handmaiden, the Korean movie, is apparently based on this. I had no idea. The Luminaries, I guess that's also a show, right, on Prime, but I'll read the book first, I think. and a true novel. I also really want to read Harlem Shuffle, the new Colson Whitehead book. That sounds awesome. And also All's Well by Mona Awad, who did Bunny, I believe, and Bunny, such a good book. If you haven't read Bunny and you're into sort of cerebral MFA writer program, weird surrealistic stuff, you should read Bunny. And finally, the favorite book to movie adaptation for me is going to be Sacred Games. I haven't read the book, so I am cheating a little bit, but if you haven't seen the show, go on Netflix and watch it. It is freaking amazing. Basically, an old criminal resurfaces in India, and this sort of washed out police officer gets the call, tries to solve the case, and in so doing unravels a whole bunch of stuff about his past while uncovering a threat to Bombay or Mumbai, I think it is, as he is going. And it keeps cutting between past and present. It is so good, so I imagine that the book is going to blow my tiny little brain. That'll do it for me. Hopefully I've kept this to a manageable length. Thank you for watching. Let me know what books you're excited about. Any answers to the tag that you want to put in the comments, feel free. And general comments are welcome. So I will see you later.